Well, hello, you guys. I'm Rick Dancer. Welcome to Get Real with Rick Dancer. And tonight we're going to do something kind of interesting. I've been doing this. I'm getting a little more brave in my world, So I'll see interesting people, connect with them, comment with them, and then without knowing a whole lot, bring them on a podcast. And because I think it's easier to find out if somebody's an axe murderer when you have them on a podcast than it is if you get to know them a little bit. And I mean, because what I'm trying to do, I think, I'll figure this out in a year or something. But my life is like that. Like people always say, how do you connect with people so easily? And you run into the most weird and interesting people. And I think it's because I'm open to it. So maybe by doing this, you guys will see how just random conversations kind of lead to some of the good stuff. Now, it's not going to be I think it's like what Joe Rogan is doing a lot of, is just commenting and conversations and finding out where people are at from other parts of the country, so you can learn some stuff. So that's what we're going to do tonight. I think this gentleman's going to be very interesting, and I use gentleman, broadly here because I don't know Daniel. I have no idea. And he's a former cop. So if you don't like cops, this is going to be your favorite show. You're going to really like this. It should be really interesting. Our show is sponsored by Bam Bam Cristiano Family Dentistry in Eugene, Oregon. Dr. Bratlin, he loves police. He's a big backer of the blue. In fact, my favorite Dr. Bratlin story is he calls me, says, Rick, I want to put up a Back the Blue billboard in Springfield, Oregon. I said, okay, what do you want? He goes, I want you on there, your face and my face. And then a woman, Christy, whose husband was killed. He was a police officer and he was killed. So we're going to have the three of us on there with Back the Blue. And I think, hey, that's a great idea. Except, you know what? Christy's going to get a pass because her husband was killed, which she should. Nobody knows who you are, Dr. Bratlin. I spent 30 years on television, so they're all going to hate me. And he said, exactly. Also, Albert Taylor, Endless Possibilities. Take care and work with people with different abilities. If you're looking for a new career or something to do that would actually really help people, they're great people to work for. Here in Montana Oral Surgeons and Dental Implant Centers. They have places in Bozeman, Butte, Helena, and Great Falls, and back in Oregon. Rains, heating, and air conditioning. Man, I could use them right now. I'm looking for, you don't get service as fast in Montana. I'm looking for somebody we had a bunch of dust come in our house the other night. I think I told you guys about that. And it just hasn't been pleasant, but I could use Rains. Bradley and his family, they do great work and they're awesome people. And our last sponsor for tonight, New Leaf Hyperbarics and Wellness Center. They do massage, they do light therapy, they do saunas, they do hyperbarics. If you've never done it before, go in and tell them. They'll give you a discount if you say you saw it on Rick Dancer's show. All right, let's get right to the show. This is Daniel Carr. Hey, Daniel, how you doing, man?
Doing great. How are you today?
It is so good to have you on here. I mean, you kind of wrote me because I've been talking about how to leave a state of blue. No, it sounds funny when you say, are you in a blue state? It sounds like a state. It really is a state, though. You know what I mean? A state of being when you're in blue versus a red state if you're a red or a blue person. It's become very odd, hasn't it?
Absolutely. It's become so odd. And, I've been watching your stuff for a while, so I'm honored that you had me on. But one of the last things that I saw from you before I reached out to you was you really went into detail about why you left Oregon. And, I just retired from the police department here. I am in a blue state, and me and the wife were looking to move someplace else. So just that whole process of it's okay to, even though you work somewhere and live somewhere and know a place for 20 plus years, it's okay to leave and start over. And seeing that you did it and you seem pretty happy that you did it, that's been a real inspiration for me. So that's why I reached out.
I think that, the hard parts, it's like, hey, I know Daniel, you interview me. The hard parts are like, I went back and I was known in Oregon and, didn't have to make friends. I mean, people just knew who I was when I walked in a room. And it's kind of fun when you go back because that's there again, and you can just walk in and you don't have to, I don't know. I don't know. And people are really kind. And I think sometimes that's what I got when I went back this last time is, online, people come on, the nastiest people seem to come online all the time and say things. So you start feeling after a while like, gosh, am I a piece of shit or what? And and then you go back home and you realize, no, there's a lot of people, and almost everybody I ran into who was supportive said, we love what you're talking about. Keep pushing
Mhm.
the envelope. That's what you're all about. And we like that. I think there's a change going on in this country. I mean, don't you kind of sense that people are I think we're fed up with being fed what we're supposed to do and somebody telling me what I'm supposed to do.
Yeah, I think that is absolutely correct. And I can just speak from where I'm coming from is that most police officers in the area that I live, very few people, unless they have like family roots here and have lived here, very few people stay here in retirement. It's kind of like the goal is to, like, once you're done, leave and just be done and go someplace that's a little more friendly.
Why is that in New Mexico? Because that's where you're living. Is is it the blueness? Is the politics? Is it the taxes? What are people experiencing?
Yeah, absolutely. It's all that. It's the crime. It's the taxes. So last year, here's a perfect example of that. Last year, our governor decided that she was going to essentially impose this gun ban under the health code, where she was essentially trying to restrict gun rights in Bernalillo County, which is my county, which is the biggest county in the state of New Mexico. She was trying to restrict gun rights under the health code, essentially using the all of the health laws from COVID for public safety, trying to extend that to gun laws. And that's stuff that you don't see everywhere. Like, luckily, it got a pretty big pushback. It didn't go through. But that's the kind of stuff that, if she was just, our governor was able to do whatever she wanted, that's the kind of stuff she would like to do. And people see that, and especially police officers who typically tend to lean a little more conservative, especially when it comes to the Second Amendment, is you see things like that and you go, there's no way I can stay here in retirement.
Right. I just was Oregon had their primary yesterday, which when this airs, it'll be different than that. But in just for the conversation's sake, and they finally got rid of this guy named Schmidt, and people call him something different. I'm sure you could probably guess what. They blew the doors off of him. I mean, overwhelming, like, get rid of him because he hasn't prosecuted anyone. They were naming off the prosecutions like last year before he came on. This is a couple of years ago. They were prosecuting 6 to 12,000 people, and I can't remember how much. Whether that was a year, I think it was a year, and now they're down to 6,000 or 3,000 or something like that. And it was like, and the crime is awful, and so people are fed up, and they got rid of him. But so posted, I said, good job, Oregon. But then this lady came on and she goes, yeah, but at the same time, Portland passed 4 new taxes, like a 10-cent gas tax and something else, to tax everybody. And it's like, I think sometimes people in blue states don't realize how different it is somewhere else, that it's not like that everywhere. They think, oh, I've had people say that to me is, oh, you're just, complaining and all this. No, it's a completely different attitude. Like here in Montana, where live and let live, and that's how it used to be in Oregon. And I think that's how most people in America, I think, want to live is, I don't want to hurt anybody. And I don't want to put people down, but I'm not going to sit around and have people telling me, like with during COVID, what I can and can't do with my body, my life, and the hypocrisy of it, my body, my choice. That only works for women and the abortion issue. It doesn't work for men and women in COVID. It's the same thing, and they need, and yet they don't see it because they're blinded to it or something. What did
Yeah,
you
that
experience? When did you leave the cops, the police work?
yeah. So I retired from the police department at the beginning of the year. So it's been just a couple months.
So what was that like during the Black Lives Matters uh, protest, defund the police movement going on? What was that like for a cop like you?
Yeah, so it was pretty interesting, and I'm going to say that I had a different view of it than a lot of people, and the reason is because I was in uniform on patrol for 15 years, and luckily I went to an investigator position in January of 20, so right before COVID, right before BLM, I went to an investigator position. So I wasn't on the ground, taking calls for service. I think that was really difficult. But where I was is I was in a unit where I was essentially investigating use of force. So when police officers were involved in any kind of a use of force, anything from a tasing all the way up to an officer involved shooting, I was one of the investigators that came to, review that case. So I was able to watch a lot of body camera footage of police officers that were really in these stressful situations. So I was able to kind of see what the officers were dealing with, but also kind of sitting back thinking like I got off the street like exactly the right time.
God, you would think that too, wouldn't you? Because, and it was like, it feels like we almost put police officers out on the streets and they had a gun, but they couldn't use anything. So you're basically a sitting duck walking out there when your tendency and your training is saying, do this. But because of political people and city councilors and mayors and woke behavior, you're restricted from what you're supposed to be doing.
Yeah, that's absolutely the case. And, my agency, we had something kind of added on to that in addition to. So, I was with the Albuquerque Police Department. And in 2014, my city entered a consent decree, one of these DOJ consent decrees. So, and it's actually just ended within the last couple of months. So,
What is that?
really,
I don't know what that is. Educate me.
oh, of course. So Bates, you've heard of these before. Right now, there's one that they're trying to do in Phoenix and in Minneapolis. Seattle had one for a long time. It's essentially where the federal government comes into a city and says, there's evidence, there's allegations that you all, as a police department, are violating constitutional rights. And it's essentially the federal government filing a federal lawsuit against a city, trying to basically not necessarily take over the police department, but force the police department to do reforms. And these are very expensive. They take forever. There's a federal judge that's over these, and I believe in Baltimore, New Orleans, Minneapolis is looking at one now. And it's difficult not just for police officers working, but also for the community, because typically under that much extra scrutiny, police officers kind of back off. And typically, what not that causation correlation equals causation, but typically crime explodes in these cities where that happened. And that's exactly what happened in Albuquerque.
Wow. And they still are doing this then?
They absolutely are doing this. Phoenix right now is the federal government is trying to do one in Phoenix, and the citizens in Phoenix, and I think you can even go to like savephoenix.com or .org, where they're trying to push back on this because they've seen what has happened to Albuquerque. And listen, here's the thing. So a lot of the reforms that came out of this consent decree, I'm not saying that they were all bad ideas. For example, we were the first major large police department to give every single a police officer on patrol a body cam. That's a good thing. That's a great thing. So I'm not saying all of the policies were bad, but it shouldn't take 10 years of federal oversight and millions of dollars to accomplish a lot of this stuff. And I think places like Phoenix and Minneapolis that are looking at one of these, and my guess is Memphis is on their list too to come into next, are kind of saying, okay, how can we do this a little bit smarter?
Well, is that why you retired early?
No, it's not. I love the job, and I was after 20 years of being a police officer, I just decided that it was time. I went to law school a few years ago. I did a part-time law school program between 2015 and 2019, and I figured that I've been a police officer long enough. It's time to do something else. And luckily, when I started with in New Mexico, that the retirement system did allow for a 20-year retirement. So I was able to retire with a pension after 20 years.
So what are you doing now? Tell people what you do now. I already know, but I'll pretend like I don't.
So the main thing that I'm doing right now is I run something called Police Law News. I write articles on Substack under that. I do TikTok and YouTube and Instagram. Essentially, I do social media content under Police Law News. And I'm pretty active on all those channels. I also do a live show on Fridays on a pretty popular YouTube channel called Cop Watch TV. I go on podcasts. A lot of the stuff that I write has been featured in the New York Post. I was on OAN a couple weeks ago. So really, I'm just doing this social media content, and I'm writing articles. And I did pass the bar exam in New Mexico, and now I'm waiting to get licensed. And once I get licensed as an attorney, I'll start doing some legal work as well.
So why do you do the police law news? What's your motivation? What are you trying? What's your goal?
So my goal in all this is one, kind of like you, I like to have interesting conversations. So as strange as this might seem, it may be as hard as it is to believe for you, but when I was in law school as a 35-year-old in law school, that there aren't a lot of people in my law school class who like police. A lot of times, a lot of the people in law school kind of saw this the other way. But what that did is I got to have such great conversations and debates with people who didn't agree with me. And that to me is more interesting than going into a briefing room at work and talking to 10 dudes who I agree with. So once law school was over, I kind of missed having these conversations. So that's the initial reason why I started Police Law News. And a lot of other police, I don't know, influencers or whatever you want to call it, people who do this type of social media content. A lot of times they say, my goal is to bridge the gap between police and citizens, and that's great. I mean, that's not really my goal. I just want to have interesting conversations. And one example that I'm going to give is there was an officer involved shooting in Chicago recently, about the Dexter Reed case. This is the one where police officers shot Mr. Reed 96 times after he fired at a police officer. Well, I look at a case like that and I say, honest, normal, reasonable people are going to have questions about that case.
Right.
They're going to say, why was he shot 96 times? Why were the officers in plain clothes? That didn't look like a regular traffic stop to me. So what I'm trying to do is if people like me aren't there answering those honest questions, those types of questions are going to be answered by people like Ben Crump and other anti-police activists. So if anything, I'm trying to, yes, have conversations, but also try to answer honest questions from people who really deserve to know.
Do you find that you're getting people who are anti-cop coming to your page, to have these conversations? I mean, I guess my question is, you're not preaching to the choir, right?
Not preaching to the choir. I would say that the majority of the people are pretty reasonable who come to my page, but no, there's a certain percent, 15, 20% who are anti-police. And here's what I think is interesting. And most of the time, as you can imagine, the hate that I get, the nasty comments, the messages, for the last 2 years I've been doing this, it almost all comes from the BLM left. That's typically the kind of criticism, or dishonest criticism that I get. Well, recently it's kind of gone the other way.
Huh.
And it's the critic, and it's strange because for the first time in 2 years, I'm getting the really harsh criticism, from the right. And it all has to do with that recent shooting of Roger Fortson in Florida, the airman who was killed by the police officer. So what that did is that a lot of people on the right are commenting with pretty nasty stuff. And I'm good to have a conversation about these cases, but it's like the hate is coming from the far right. And what I've said for a long time, and I didn't have any evidence to corroborate it, is that both the very edges of the far left and the far right don't like police. But this is the first time I'm kind of feeling the hate from that side.
Huh. What is that? That's really interesting, because I don't think most people would think that. You know, do you think that the far left and the far right are so out of here's what I use this example a lot in my I was in Eugene, Springfield for 30 years or so. And I say, when I first went to that area, a beat up Volvo with smoke coming out the back, with bumper stickers that said, kill your TV, don't trust authority, don't trust big pharma, all that. Those were the liberals. Now, those are the Republicans, and the liberals are the ones trust big pharma, get in bed with big corporations, all this kind of stuff. And I'm like going, they went so far left and right that they went like this, boom, and they just switched. They just became the other thing. And
That's exactly it. I mean, I grew up in the '90s listening to Rage Against the Machine. Now it's completely opposite. It's rage for the machine. It's nuts.
Right. I think that was the most surprising thing to me about the pandemic is the number of really liberal friends I had. Like, you like when they were telling people to mask up and do all this stuff. I understand the fear at the beginning, because we didn't know what was going on. But after a few weeks, it became pretty obvious to me that something was awry, and that the more the governor got on, and our governor would get on and go, I know this is really, really hard, and then under her breath it was, but I'm going to choke you people and let me do whatever I want to do because I've got power and my thumb's coming. But a bunch of my liberal friends, they just said, oh, she's saving us. And they just went right along with it. I'm going, no, you guys are supposed, remember the question everything bumper stickers? God, and then the news is go line up like cattle and get your shot. I'm going, where are all my friends that were questioning this stuff? And some of the people that there were people I knew that like responded the way you thought they were gonna. And then they're the ones that would just totally blew you away where you thought, I didn't know you were that fearful, or I thought you'd be more fearful. You know what I mean? It really brought people, don't you think this, like, it ripped off all the scabs and it said, this is who you truly are. I mean, it showed your any kind of weakness that you had was exposed by that. The reaction, not by COVID, but the reaction to COVID.
Absolutely. But I'm curious, how much of it do you think is people who were actually afraid of it, as opposed to people who think, okay, this is how I identify. I identify as this particular political thing, and this is what we're supposed to do to virtue signal. And I guess another way that I kind of think about this, and I've thought about this a lot. What if when COVID went down, what if Trump said that Trump was the one who wanted everyone to mask? What if Trump wanted to lock everyone down? What do you think the left would have said? Do you think
Right.
that they would have gone along with it, or would they be the complete opposite? And I just think so. How much of this is what people honestly feel, and how much of is them just projecting what they think they're supposed to?
That's an interesting idea because, yeah, how much was it, virtue signaling? And I think a lot of it was like, and they did a really good job of selling it as, I mean, people would write me and say, you don't care about other people. Well, this has nothing to do, because our bottom line was, I didn't believe this was that I was spreading it and this is going on, and now I see the evidence that it's all horseshit. And I think so we were buying into a different foundation. But what scared me the most, Daniel, I think out of all that, was how easily we are manipulated by people in power with fear. And then, and I can't say this on this podcast, but there's a person in history back in the 40s with the first name had an H. And if you say that word on here, they'll shut you down. But I mean, it's no different than what he did to people. And we see it, and 10 years ago, wouldn't you have sit there and gone, I think most people have said, I can't believe people fell for that, that they did that. And I would say a lot of times during the pandemic, I say, in 20 years, when I'm 80, I'm going to be sitting in a movie theater watching a documentary on how stupidly, that's not even a word, but you know what I mean, how stupidly we reacted, and people will pretend like they never did. No, it was, but it was a different time, and that's what I think is crazy. But I think the scary thing for me is that we aren't questioning still. I've got people still that won't admit they were wrong, or that we did things wrong. And when you don't do that, it'll happen again, because if you don't deal with what didn't go right, then it's they'll just push harder.
That's exactly correct, and I think that for sure nationally, that's what a lot of Republicans are dealing with. Is that a lot of Republican voters, or people who didn't necessarily go along with this stuff, and who were rightfully irritated and frustrated that they were blocked from social media, that people that they like to listen to weren't allowed to say certain things, that friends of theirs had their gym shut down, that they want accountability. They want
Right.
accountability, and the thing is that I don't think we're going to get it, and
No.
that's frustrating for a lot of us. But I don't think we're going to get it. Luckily, so as you saw during COVID, a lot of police officers refused to get the shot, and they were subsequently terminated by jurisdictions all around the country. And I mean, luckily that didn't happen in my police department, but we were close. Like the mayor, we have a pretty liberal mayor, and there were conversations about him wanting to do this. Well, again, being in the middle of reforms with DOJ, we're already understaffed by several hundred police officers. Crime was at an all-time high. So luckily, things didn't line up where they weren't able to implement that. They can't afford to lose any cops. But a lot of us want accountability for some of these people, but it seems like we're not going to get it.
No, I mean the nursing shortage we're having right now, and I want to go, you think? How many nurses and doctors did you lay off because they wouldn't get the shot and the public went along with it? Well, they shouldn't be there. I mean, and now we're having this crisis of nurses. We don't have enough nurses, and a lot of these small hospitals are bringing in traveling nurses, which costs them a lot more, but they can't get full-time nurses. And it's because and it's your cause, and then I'm supposed to feel sorry for you. And it's like, I love how you put that. I think that's what it is. It's accountability, so that not because I'm right, you're wrong, but because if we don't figure out what didn't go well, I mean, after any kind of catastrophe or like a cop thing, if you have a cop shooting and all that, you go back and you look at everything to see what happened, even if one, to find fault, who is at fault, but also to say, we want to make sure this doesn't happen again. What could be done that could change that so we wouldn't be in this same situation. And to me, if we don't look at what's gone on the last 5 years and try to learn from that, but when it's, when people won't even address it and I think the funny part right now is the canceling it's backfired. I mean, I love it because it doesn't work anymore. And maybe it's just me. Maybe I've been canceled so much that I don't even care anymore. You know what I mean? I don't know how you get.
Yeah, no, that's a perfect way to say it. Is that it's not anyone who was, because anybody can be wrong, especially if you're in a situation where they're telling you this is a global pandemic. It's so dangerous. Anybody in that moment could be wrong. I'm good with that. But yeah, the accountability part. It's like, it's not that I don't want anyone to admit that they were wrong or be embarrassed. What I want is to criticize the policy. I don't want to criticize the individuals. I want to criticize the policy. And your analogy to a police case, that's perfect, because in the police department in my last few years, that's what I did. When there was a critical incident, I was the guy that I would not only look at what the cops did, but I would look at what the internal affairs, how they investigated. And then I would look to see, okay, are there any gaps in training, policy, equipment? If something went bad, how can we fix it? And the idea that you're not going to have this conversation is insane. And that's all that's all we want when it comes to accountability. Just admit that you are wrong, because if they're not on the record of saying this policy was wrong, you're right. What's to stop this from happening again?
Right. So as a cop, what do people not understand about you and your fellow men and women in blue? What do you think the biggest misunderstanding in the public is? I'd be curious to know your thoughts on that. And obviously, this is your opinion. This is Daniel Carr's opinion. This doesn't represent anybody else in the whole world. And guess what? We can still do that because it is America. But I'm curious. You were there. What do you think if you polled many of your police officers, your brothers and sisters in the force? What would they say the biggest misunderstanding is?
I think the biggest misunderstanding is that it just generally just people often don't think that police officers are just regular people. They are just regular people, and sometimes police officers make mistakes. And I guess the one thing that I'm going to say is that I guess what's most frustrating from being a police officer is that an officer can work for 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. They could have a great career, and they make one mistake. They do one thing wrong that ends up on YouTube, or something happens, and it's like the hate is like, not only is it that cop is a bad cop, it doesn't matter that for the prior 18 years they made no mistakes, they did nothing wrong. It's that you make one mistake, and that's going to define you for forever, especially when it comes to like a use of force or something like that. And I think that's frustrating for police officers. Also, I think it's like people don't understand what the intent of police officers are. Like the idea that police officers, want to like go around and just arrest people all day. I can tell you that after your first year as a cop, like if you see a cop with as much gray hair as me, that's not a dude who wants to arrest anybody. Okay, he's looking to solve everything, and anything without having to do a whole lot of paperwork, without taking people to jail. So I guess I guess I'll end it with, the biggest misunderstanding is that, what the intent of police officers are.
Because I mean, it's kind of interesting if you took any other profession, like a bus driver. So a bus driver gets in one wreck. Does that mean his whole career was that he's a horrible bus driver and all that stuff? And we do that to people, but especially to cops. I mean, you guys got so hammered during the Black Lives Matters protests and stuff that, it was scary to be out at this protest. I'd go out there and, take some video and stuff, and you'd see them spitting on police and stuff like that. And these are your neighbors. These are people that you go to church with, and you go to the grocery store and you hang out with, and all of a sudden, we take a broad brush, and we're not afraid as a culture to just sideswipe people. And I think I hope that changes, because I think it's pretty devastating. And like you said, I think if when you really look at the statistics, it's, the I don't know if I want to go there, but crime is committed by groups of people, and there's statistics that show it, and we want to deny it. And then we want to blame another group of people. And it's just like, I guess I'm just tired of that whole thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and what I try to do is, one of the things that I like to do on a lot of my social media and stuff is to really just to put everything into context. Like the best way that I can explain is, every year United States police officers arrest right around 10 million people. There's also approximately 1,000 fatal officer involved shootings. Now, of those 1,000 fatal officer involved shootings, typically 990 of them are legal. You know, but even if we take the 1,000, so that means, if you do the math on that, literally 99.9999% of all arrests happen without police officers killing anyone.
Right.
It's like, yes, we can all agree that, yes, sometimes there are bad police incidents. I think about the Tyree Nichols case in Memphis. It was horrific. Any police officer that you talk to is absolutely going to agree. But again, it's important to put these things in context. Listing 4 or 5 controversial or problematic officer-involved shootings from across the decade as like the parade of horribles, like this is the list. I go, okay, well, yeah, in that time there were literally 50 million arrests. I agree that there's 6 or 7 bad ones, but to not put it in that context,
Right.
I think, is pretty dishonest.
Well, and that's like, how many people die on the operating room table? No doctor ever really tells you. You don't know. You go in and you sign the paperwork, and you're trusting that you're going to be the one that doesn't react to the anesthesia the wrong way. But I mean, if you really I remember when my mother-in-law died, we couldn't figure out why. We had an autopsy done, and they never did determine it. And the doctor told us, he said, on the TV, they always get the answer for death. He goes, in real life, it's pretty much 50-50. We don't know. He goes, people just die, and we don't always, yes, there's a cause, but we don't always know what it is. And I think with all this is, if you take that out of context, well, then look how many people die mysteriously. You know what I mean? It's like we blow things up into a big thing. So as for the country, let's just get into something a little deeper here too. So what is your concern for the country right now? Just as a
In
human being.
Just as a human being, I think my concern for the country is that we don't live in the same reality. That's what I think the problem is that we can't agree on facts, and I almost think that that's intentional. It's like there are so many things where it's like we can't agree on, like what a boy or girl is. We can't agree on, are the police systematically racist? We can't agree on just some of these facts, and if we can't agree on facts, then it makes it so difficult. And just one example real quick is this recent officer involved shooting that happened in Florida with the airmen, and it was an absolute tragedy. Roger Fortson, civil rights attorney Ben Crump, went on the news, and he said a couple things. He said the police officers went to the wrong apartment. He said police officers didn't announce who they were, and police officers kicked in the door. We got the body camera footage a few days later, and we found all three of those were lies. But we know that there's certain millions amount of people who are going to read these headlines with these things, and for the next 20 years, they're going to think that police officers burst into this guy's house and killed him because Ben Crump said it once. So it's the ability to just not tell the truth, and we kind of live in different realities, and I think that's the biggest problem.
Well, I think that was even learned with a little bit with George Floyd, some of the things that led up to that incident, which was a horrible thing. But now you can't even, I mean, I'm sitting here stumbling around, not even wanting to bring it up because that puts you in a camp that people are, we won't even allow people to have a discussion anymore about alternate facts. You know what I mean? Where it's, I mean, you look at what's going on right now. I'll bring this one up, because I get people screaming, and I think it's where we get our information. But you got Joe Biden is found with confidential papers in his garage. Okay. He was the vice president of the United States when he had those papers, which he wasn't supposed to have. As I understand it, he's not supposed to have those papers as a vice president. But then he is not prosecuted because he's not mentally capable to be prosecuted, but he's apparently mentally capable to be our president. Now we have Trump. And I'm not like a big Trump fan. You know what I mean? I mean, if it comes down to the two people, everybody knows who I'm voting for. But you got Trump, who was classified to have those papers, has those papers in his house, probably shouldn't have, but now he's being prosecuted because his mind is completely there. I mean, those are two things where it's like, why can't we as people in this country go, okay, wait, if you're not going to prosecute one, you shouldn't prosecute either of them, or else you get them both. But you can't have different systems of justice for different people, because now as you watch this thing, I mean, this thing in New York right now with Trump, I mean, even my friends on the Democratic side are quietly and secretly in my ear saying, this is total bullshit. This shouldn't be happening. And I think, people get so blinded by hate and fear that they do absolutely ridiculous things. And they're going to push the man they're so afraid of right into the White House because of their fear and hatred. And and they've done that to me. I'm sure you get that with stuff. I mean, I've lost clients. I have one client that was a friend of mine, or he wasn't even a client. He's a friend of mine who went to one of my other clients and said, you should stop sponsoring Rick because he gives out misinformation. It's like, so it was that important to him to try to destroy my monthly budget that you'd go behind my back to a client and try to get them to leave. I mean, that is evil. That's a certain kind of evil that is just unbelievable. And that didn't happen. And in fact, the client started working with me even more because they thought that was great that, we were making some headway. But I mean, that's what America looks like right now, where it's, and I saw that during the pandemic. Is like, I said, I just wasn't going to get a vax because I had cancer. And one of my doctors said, well, Rick, we don't know what caused it. And I wouldn't put something in my body that is experimental in case that could rejolt that and make it happen again. That's me. But then I was called selfish and killing people. And what? So I'm supposed to put my body at risk, against my doctor's orders. And these people go, well, and I'd say, why would you do that? Well, you're trying to protect other people. I mean, that kind of attitude, I think, is really scary out there.
It absolutely is. And your example of the Trump documents and the Biden documents, I mean, to kind of tie that into the larger conversation, it's that it's not just that these two people are being treated, they did kind of the same thing. They're being treated vastly different. But then the Democrats are the ones saying democracy's in jeopardy.
Yeah.
That's what's insane. That's the problem. It's like, could you imagine if Trump had prosecuted or tried to prosecute or started something to try to prosecute Hillary? I mean, they would go crazy. And
Right.
it's like that's the difference. It's like when Trump before 2016 or in 2016, when people at Trump rallies were yelling "lock her up," I always thought it was kind of a joke.
That's ridiculous. Yeah.
But I was saying to my friends, like, yeah, like it would be like objectively a bad idea if he went after Hillary Clinton. So but then they actually do it, and it's fine. And the democracy is in jeopardy because of the Republican. I mean, that's the part where it's like, how are we living in these are different realities. And again, I don't know if these people, honestly think this, or if they're just saying this because they think they're supposed to.
Well, I heard an interview with, and I heard the interview, the actual interview with James Comey today. And he was saying that if Trump is elected, that he's going to use the DOJ and the FBI and these different agencies to what is it we always that people to God, what's the term? I can't think of it now. Well, use it to weaponize those agencies. And I'm like going, you mean like is already being done by the other current administration? And I'm like, how do we as people, I don't understand how as people, if we know that, and maybe they're not hearing it because they're listening to certain news cases or something, I don't know. But how can you not see the hypocrisy in that and go, wait a minute, you're blatantly saying weaponizing these agencies, and that's exactly what has been done already. And people are going, yeah, that's what Trump's going to do. And it's like, no, your man's already doing that. That's the stuff, Daniel, I don't understand humans when, I mean, if it was me, I'd probably shut my mouth and be quiet because I'd start going, oh God, that's what we've been saying. You know what I mean? It's like,
Yeah.
that kind of stuff, I do not understand. And I don't get where people aren't embarrassed that it's so obvious. And which only tells me, I don't, this isn't stupid. These people are ignorant. They really don't know what's going on. Out there. They're not listening. They're listening to one brand of news and they're not, I listen to Democrat news too, because I want to know what's going on over there. And I was never like, I've been a non-affiliated voter for years and I'm not a partisan guy. I ran as a Republican because they already had a Democrat and I'm closer to a Republican and being more conservative. I'm really pretty close to a libertarian, except for the law. I mean, I think police should have the right to go in and, bust up stuff. And so I'm not a true libertarian, but I'm really one of those people that you do what you do. And as long as you're not hurting other people and it's not infringing on my rights, it's none of my business. I don't care how you sleep, who you sleep with, what you do. I mean, that's between you and God. It has nothing to do with me. But when you start telling me, when you're doing one thing and you're telling me I have to do another, screw you.
Yeah, no, that's exactly how I feel about it. I mean, I've been a registered libertarian for about 10 years now, though I typically vote for one of the two major parties. And kind of like you, like, yeah, if it's between Biden or Trump, like I'm gonna vote for Trump. But I'm not the biggest Trump fan. But yeah, that's who I'm. If it's between the two, but I think, like, what they've been doing to him. I think if he gets elected, and if he doesn't, kind of be vindictive and go after some of these people, well, I think, like, well, what kind of message does that send? That it kind of sends the message of, well, we can do it to you, and we know you're not going to do anything back. So it's like, I don't want our country to go down this rabbit hole. I just think, like, it's already started. What's the quickest way to end it?
Right.
I'm not sure. I think you just have to go in and bomb. I don't know.
Yeah. I just hope that I have a feeling this election when it's over that there's going to be, if like a Biden win, I think a bunch of Trump people are going to go. I just think it's going to be a disaster because people are going to go, I'm not doing this and I'm not going to do it again. And the same thing with Trump is there's people that are going to go, I'm not going to, yeah, I do find it funny. I don't know if you do, when like Cher and Barbara Streisand and Joy Behar are saying, I'm leaving the country if Trump wins. And to me, it's like, well, don't let the door hit you on the way out. But I find it the same way. They could be Republicans. I don't give a shit. But I find the same thing funny on social media. Somebody goes, I'm leaving social media. And it's like, oh, please don't. I'll miss you so much. Nobody gives a crap. Just leave. We don't have to have an announcement. And then usually 3 weeks later, you see them back online, doing the same old thing. And I'm going, do you ever wonder if God scratches his head sometimes and said, I should have used the dolphin? I was trying to get some intelligent form of life that could inhabit the planet and make it a really cool place. And I picked these humans, and oh my gosh, this is just not working out.
Absolutely. And I think I just heard Kid Rock say he was going to leave the country if Biden won again. I don't think anyone's going to leave, but what I do think is going to happen is if Trump wins, I think we're going to see riots all over the country, just like they were preparing for in 2020 had Trump won that time.
Yeah. And what if Biden wins? Do you think that Republicans will do the same thing?
I sure hope not. I know there's not going to be riots around the country, and I hope that the January 6th type thing doesn't happen again. My guess is it won't, because I think most people saw, okay, I mean, obviously, if you assaulted police officers or committed
Right.
property damage, nobody is good with that. But I think we've seen it, even if you just kind of went there walking around like you were on a senior citizens tour, that even those people were looked at by the FBI, and most normal people, aren't looking to get into that kind of trouble. So my guess is probably not, and I hope not.
I knew people that were there and were not, and he had no idea what was going on.
Yeah.
Anything was happening. And then and there's a really good documentary out that people should watch if they have questions. And I can't remember, but it's a timeline. So they show Trump speaking and then these people going in and these instigators moving these people through the thing.
Hmm.
I mean, you see what's going on. But nobody, anytime I tell somebody you should go watch this, they're just there. No. And then the January 6th thing is so weird because you can bring it up and say, well, because I one day said, well, what about what you guys did with BLM riots? I mean, you were rioting during the pandemic, telling me to stay home in a mask. And these people were out rioting without masks, allegedly putting me at grave danger. But it's okay because the virus has a political bent. And if you're supporting Black Lives Matters, then the virus doesn't attack you. I mean, that's just stupid. And it's like, so one set of rules for one group and another set of rules for another group. And then I thought, well, wait, and you destroyed federal property because everybody's all up in arms about the January 6th. I think it was a horrible thing too, but they were destroying the federal courthouse in Portland, Oregon. They burned out, they were
Hmm.
breaking out windows. That's
Yep.
taxpayer property. So why is the Capitol so much more special than other federal property? Is it the group that was doing it? You bet it is. That's all they cared about. And, they destroyed private businesses in Portland. They destroyed public businesses in Portland. And nobody said a word. And people go, oh, yeah, there were many arrests. There were not very many arrests. There was a cop in Portland, Oregon, who was blinded because of something they threw and, got in his eye and he was blinded permanently. So that's nothing. That was just the cost of the George Floyd thing. And I just think we have our priorities really screwed up in this country where when we use ideology to determine, why can't people admit both were wrong and that both causes were really taken out of control. And anytime violence, I mean, they all, tout, Martin Luther King. He was a peaceful protester. He was a powerful protester, but he wasn't involved in things that turned into where they were going after people like that. I mean, and nobody wants to talk about that.
No, and that's something that I've mentioned several times on a lot of the content I do. It's like I care about the behavior. If you
Yep.
are attacking police officers or you are breaking into businesses or destroying federal property, that's what I care about. The bad idea that fueled, whether it's BLM, whether it's the January 6th people, whatever the bad idea is that kind of put that bad behavior into motion, I don't really care about. I don't really think we should have thought crime. We should go after the actual behavior. And that's the problem where when you bring up things like BLM and the federal courthouse in Portland, it's that no, the thing is that they don't care. They don't care about the damage and destruction. They certainly don't care about attacking police officers. They care about the thought crime.
So wouldn't it be powerful if somebody could really do a peaceful protest with thousands and thousands of people and really do it well? Just think of the what people would pay attention to. You know what I mean? Because I think when you get out of hand and you start attacking officers, you start attacking Jimmy John's in Eugene, Oregon, and destroying businesses and Starbucks and stuff like that, you lose your message because people like you and me are going to go, I can't get past that you destroyed someone's life to make a point because you're selfish and you wanted to get attention, instead of if you just block, you get on a federal courthouse out on the park, doing that kind of stuff. Don't block traffic. Don't stop people from getting to where they need to get, because you don't know how you're negatively impacting them. And that's the whole thing. These are narcissists who don't care. It's about them and their cause, and they could give a rip about people. I mean, we have a guy in Eugene that his restaurant, they just demolished it every time. And it was just tough on him because, it was getting trashed, and he had no opinion. It wasn't like standing out. It wasn't like me, my dentist client, because he put up that Back to Blue thing. They tore down his sign on the front, that's his dental sign and stuff. And you're going, and that cost him, $3,000-$4,000 to put back up. What, that's just crazy. So tell people, how do people find you? You and I could go on for days, but how do people find you, and what, and what kind of give them a pitch about what you do again, so people will come look for you.
Yeah, thank you so much. So the main thing that I do is I basically break down the most important issues in policing. If there's a controversial police case, that's the kind of stuff I'm going to break down and do videos on and write articles about pretty much as soon as it happens. And a lot of my content, a lot of my ideas come from people texting me and messaging me and saying, hey, can you look at this case? And that's where a lot of my content is. I write articles on Substack. It's under Police Law Newsletter. And then if you type in Police Law News, I'm on YouTube and TikTok and Instagram and Twitter as well, or X. And I pretty much break down the most important and interesting cases in policing is pretty much on a daily basis. I do daily content, and that's what I'm mostly doing right now. It's a lot of fun. And more what I think is, what I don't do is it's not that I defend police officers like a reflex. I think what's more important is to look at a case or look at instances honestly. If the police officers messed up, I'm going to say that they messed up. But the thing is, my criticism isn't going to be general. It's not going to be that police officers are racist or police officers are tyrants. I'm going to say, here's what happened, and here's where the police officer messed up. Here's the law, here's the policy, here's the training, here's where they messed up, and to give a reason why. And that's the kind of interesting and honest conversation that I like to have about these issues, because I think this stuff is just fascinating.
Right. And we all want to be educated, and with podcasts and everything, learn. But here, I like what you're doing, because here's a guy who's been there, who does this, and you're dissecting it for us, instead of saying, like the media, just going, oh, what did AP feel? What was the headline on AP? Oh, okay, I'll just regurgitate that. And without thinking about it, you can go through the case and look at what the person, he or she, did right or wrong, or why they should, and I think that's helpful to people if they want to know that.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I really appreciate being on, and yeah, that's the kind of stuff I like to do, and that's really what my content is all about.
Well, stay in contact with me, because I like this, and I'd love to have you on from time to time, just to talk about
Absolutely.
certain things like this, because I think there are some. Next time there's something big that happens, we should have you on, and just, it would be kind of fun to get your hit on it, and so people can kind of, understand something a little bit better. Because I think that's one thing I hope we're learning through all this, is that you can't depend on anybody to educate you but you. And if you think it's going to come in an easy form, it's not. It takes a little homework, and you got to dig around a little bit. I mean, I listen to so many different podcasts from both, right and left, and so that I can keep my head in the game and understand what people are thinking and stuff. And I think that's what everybody needs to do. So,
Absolutely.
Daniel,
And I love your podcast. I love your articles. And anytime you want to have me back on, I'd be honored, sir.
all right, Daniel Carr, thank you so much. Police Law News. I'll talk to you later.
Thank you.
So if you guys check him out, find out more about him. And, the big picture story is, start talking to people you don't know. You know what I mean? There's Albuquerque, New Mexico, and Rick Dancer from Montana and / Oregon before. And, I think this is how you build relationships, friendships, coalitions, and how you educate yourself. Because now that I know he's there, it's a really good way to, if there's a police shooting or something going on, a police involved shooting, then I have a contact and a resource. So I don't have to listen to MSNBC or Fox News or whatever their hit is on it. I got somebody I can go to and find out the facts of the case. So yeah, well, I hope you enjoyed that. And you just never know. I'm going to do a lot more of this stuff. Just I got a kid on this week. That's actually, is that night? Yeah, tonight. Found him on TikTok, and I think he's going to be very interesting to you. A young man who's, I think it should be pretty cool. So if you're watching this one live, go back and look at last week, and you'll see something interesting as well. All right, I'm Rick Dancer. Thank you for our sponsors, for everybody, and I will talk to you next time you're around. Good night.